Welcome to People, Power, and Politics. Hard talk, riveting interviews, community updates, in-depth analysis. That's People, Power, and Politics. We tell it to you as it is. No holds barred. You are the people, you have the power. We bring you the politics. To listen to our show, be a guest, or to advertise, visit www.pppradio.nyc. That's www.pppradio.nyc.
You are listening to People, Power, and Politics, where we explore the forces shaping our city and the people working to change it. I am your host, Phillip, and today we are joined by New York City Councilmember Justin Brannan, a progressive voice from Brooklyn and now a candidate for NYC Comptroller. As the city's chief financial officer, the Comptroller manages a $250 billion pension fund, audits city agencies, and helps shape the budget priorities that affect every New Yorker. Brannan is running on a platform that promises transparency, fiscal responsibility, and bold investments in working-class communities. We'll discuss his vision for the office, the challenges ahead, and why he thinks this role is key to building a more equitable New York. Welcome, sir. Such a pleasure and honor to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me, Pearl. I appreciate you having me on.
You're so very welcome. So you've served on the New York City Council and built a reputation as a progressive voice. What motivated your decision to run for comptroller, and how do you see this role as a continuation of your work in public service?
Right on. So I'm currently chair of the Finance Committee in the City Council. So I wouldn't be running for comptroller if I wasn't already doing the work in the Finance Committee. And I've really come to understand the power of the city budget in the ways that it can make people's lives easier, especially working people in the immigrant community. It's almost $115 billion budget. I come from a place where I don't think that people should be struggling so hard to get by in the richest city in the world. You've got first responders, you got teachers, nurses, cops. All of them have to work two jobs just to get by in the richest city in the world. And so as finance chair, the past bunch of years, I've been fighting hard to claw back cuts that the administration tried to make to our schools and our parks and to CUNY and to our libraries. And, I don't just talk about values, right? I rewrote the budget to reflect those values because I believe that the budget is ultimately what the city cares about, right? If I want to know what you care about, I want to know what you spend your money on. And the city is no different, right? The city needs to actually show their values through that moral document that is the budget. And being comptroller, for me, would just be a continuation of the work I'm doing now in the council.
Excellent. So you understand the money.
Yes.
Okay. So the comptroller is often described as the city's financial watchdog. What would you do differently from your predecessors to bring more transparency and accountability to how public money is spent?
So I've always believed in my career that knowledge is power, and I think empowering New Yorkers and taxpayers to better understand that this is their money, right? That $115 billion budget, this is their tax dollars. And, when people get their paycheck and they see all the taxes being taken out, the reason why they're upset is because they don't see a return on that investment. If they were actually seeing clean streets, safe streets, nice parks, good schools, they wouldn't care so much about having to pay so much taxes. They might say, you know what, I'll pay more taxes. But the reason why they're not is because they're not seeing a return on that investment. So there's corruption in our government. There's collusion. There's a lot of people getting sweetheart deals. You got to root that out. You got to level the playing field so everyone gets a fair shot. And I believe that sunshine is ultimately the best disinfectant, right? I want to empower New Yorkers so they can better understand how the budget works, how the pension funds work, how contracting works, because I think they need to know because it's their money. And I think giving them the power and putting that power back in their hands is what this moment calls for.
I've interviewed many comptroller candidates, and this is the first time I've heard a candidate say that this is our money.
That's right.
I've not heard that before.
It's not in my checking account. It's the city's money, right? And people should feel a certain way that they're not seeing a return on their investment. And for me, I come from Southern Brooklyn. I represent Coney Island and Bay Ridge in the city council currently. And sometimes I feel like the further away you live from City Hall, the less attention you get. And it's wrong, right? You've got some neighborhoods that are fighting over crumbs while other neighborhoods are getting the full loaf of bread. And it's wrong. And the outer boroughs need some respect.
They do. And New Yorkers are feeling the impact of rising costs, housing insecurity, and strain public services, how would you use the powers of the Comptroller's office to advocate for equity and economic justice across the 5 boroughs?
It's a great question. I believe on the most fundamental level that the government should be a tool to advance equity. Our government, the number one job should be, number one, keep people safe, and number 2, level the playing field so everyone's got the same fair shot and there's equal application of the law. But none of that can happen if the government is not working efficiently, right? If things aren't running properly. And the numbers tell a story. They show that there is inequity across the boroughs. There's some neighborhoods that are getting more than others. And with a $115 billion budget, people shouldn't be struggling so hard. I think we have to spotlight those disparities, in service delivery so people can see, why is the garbage getting picked up more in one neighborhood and not mine? Why are the schools better in this neighborhood and not, I don't want this us versus them. It shouldn't be like that. People shouldn't feel like, I went to X neighborhood and things look so great. How come my neighborhood can't have that? Fact is, your neighborhood can have that. We just have to do a better job at spending our money. And if you're paying taxes in the city, then you deserve to see a return on that investment on your block, right? In your own backyard. And I want to use the power of the audit to hold these city agencies accountable to better understand how they're spending their money and why so many people are struggling to make ends meet in the richest city in the world.
So you've described New York City as a palace for working people, and you have stated that you want to be the working people's bulldog. How would your approach as Comptroller differ from the current administration in prioritizing working class New Yorkers?
Look, I'm a Southern Brooklyn guy, so I'm always going to put outer borough working class people first and foremost. From Southeast Queens to Southern Brooklyn to the South Bronx to Staten Island. These people work really hard. They pay a lot in taxes. They want to see a return on their investment. Look, a lot of politicians give speeches and send letters. I'm a fighter. I'm not a letter writer, right? I'm there to stand up and fight.
They give reports as well.
And they do reports, right? But I think in this moment, people are looking for someone who's going to stand up and fight back against Donald Trump, hold the next mayor accountable. Whoever the next mayor is, you got to hold him accountable. And your job as Comptroller is to be that independent watchdog, that independent bulldog. And, we need to get back to basics. We need to make sure that our garbage is getting picked up, that our schools look good, that our streets are clean, that our parks are getting the grass cut. But you need someone who's got a track record of not only delivering and reversing cuts, but standing up to the mayor, having the courage to stand up and call out injustice when you see it.
So you've talked about using the office to be more proactive rather than reactive. Can you give us a specific example of a systematic problem you'd target immediately if elected as the next Comptroller?
Sure. Procurement reform, right? You see nonprofits now that are waiting months and months, if not years, to get paid back for work that they already did. The city is absolutely bleeding money, hemorrhaging money on bad contracts and mismanagement and dysfunction. It's long, long overdue that someone fixes it. And there's a reason why people don't want to do business with the city because it's too hard and you don't get paid. You don't get paid back on time. The city needs to pay its damn bills on time, just like me and you do. Procurement delays are strangling small nonprofits and community organizations. You have outside IT, tech contractors and consultants that are just bleeding us dry because no one's minding the store. You've got a bloated Department of Education budget at $40 billion a year where I don't know a public school parent or a public school teacher in the city that feels like they're working with a $40 billion budget. We're not seeing the outcomes that our kids need to see. Our teachers don't have what they need in the classroom. And all of this comes down to how we spend our money. And MWBEs, right? I want to set up MWBEs to succeed. And in order to do that, you have to expand their access to credit and capital so that they can actually compete. Because right now, we're setting great goals for our MWBEs, but then we're putting them in rooms where they can't compete with the bigger companies. And we've got to do a better job at that. And I think the way that we do that is by leveraging our pension funds and leveraging the budget to give them the tools they need to compete.
Okay, so as finance chair, you've been a vocal advocate for protecting essential services. How would you leverage the Comptroller's office to prevent future cuts to libraries, early childhood education, and cultural institutions, especially for the minority communities?
First and foremost, you have to keep your ear to the ground. You got to work closely with, unions and parents and educators and families, the people that are on the ground who know what's going on. They know better than anybody, right? And I need to make it harder. I think we should be making it harder for mayors to get away with cutting essential services, right? Some of the items that we fought back with this mayor on over the past couple of years are things that New Yorkers rely on, like our parks and libraries and early childhood education system and CUNY. These are not areas that should be up for debate. They should be well funded because people rely on them. And, I believe that in the richest city in the world where people are struggling to get by, the sharpest tool we have to bring down the cost of living is that $115 billion budget. So if we're actually using that money and allocating that money to the programs and priorities that would make life easier for working families, then we have a better city, right? You hear every day, the rich people are fleeing the city. Mm-hmm. It's not true. Working families are fleeing the city because they can't afford to live here. I feel like every day I hear from someone saying they're considering leaving New York City because it's easier to buy a house, it's easier to start a family, it's easier to start a small business somewhere else. We can't lose working families. They are the bedrock of our economy, and the city's got to do something about it. And that's one of my top priorities as controller.
So we should have a do not touch for certain.
Absolutely. Things. I mean, stuff like our parks and libraries, these should not be up for debate every year. Are we going to fund them or not?
Mm-hmm. All right, great. So the controller also oversees pension funds worth over $250 billion. Your platform includes investing pension funds in affordable housing, renewable energy, and initiatives combating climate change. How do you balance ethical investments with the need to secure strong returns for city workers?
Great question. First and foremost, your number one responsibility as controller is protecting, managing, and growing the pension funds, right? Number one. So any investment you make, you've got to make sure that you're going to get a good return on that investment for the retirees. It's almost 1 million retirees that rely on that pension system. Making sure that you get the state mandated 7% return on investment, that is your number one priority. Everything else comes second. You got to make sure that your investments align with your values as well as the values as a city. And you have to work in partnership with the trustees to make sure you're making smart investments that not only align with the values of the city, but also get a good return, right? Support for affordable housing, for universal child care, for fighting climate change. These are all things that are important to New Yorkers. They align with the values of the city, and they would get us good returns on our investment. You got to avoid risky short-term bets. You always have to take that long-term approach and partner with other cities and states on smarter, more creative investments. There's a lot of other cities that have much smaller pension funds that we do that are leveraging their pension funds in a way that's very, very interesting and I think helpful. But it's not either or, right? I think we've proven that you can get strong returns while investing in the future so that city workers can retire with dignity. And the city that they retire in should still be affordable and accommodating so they can have a great retirement. I'm a future city retiree too, right? So I want to have a good pension to rely on, but I want to make sure that pension is growing, but that you're making safe, stable, long-term investments.
Okay, so normally the controller's office is looked at as an office to run for mayor.
Right.
How do you plan to make the often overlooked work of the controller's office more accessible and relevant to everyday New Yorkers?
It's a great question. I feel like sometimes people don't hear about the controller until there's some big scandal that you've uncovered in an audit. People need to know, and I think over the next 4 years, certainly with the threat of funding cuts from Washington, people are going to start to learn who their controllers and treasurers are in their cities and states across the country, because how we manage our money and how we build a fiscal firewall around the city is going to be how we survive the next 4 years, right? Seeing the threat of the federal government, we're already seeing where Elon Musk and Donald Trump are trying to claw back hundreds of millions of dollars that were legally appropriated by Congress. You need a fighter. You need a fighter who understands the budget, but
bulldog.
That sounds good. You need a bulldog who understands the budget, but who's going to fight back. And I think being out there in the communities, making sure people know who you are, making sure that people know. The easiest way I explain it is if the mayor is the CEO of the city, then the controller is the CFO of the city. And I think that's important, right? Have a more accessible system so that people can, so that whistleblowers can give us tips on where they think there's fraud and waste and abuse in the different agencies. I want to do neighborhood-specific reports so that, say folks out in Far Rockaway who feel like, they're fighting over crumbs while other neighborhoods are getting the full loaf of bread. Let's find out why that is. Let's find out why they're paying so much in taxes, but they're not seeing a return on their investment. So I want to be the people's controller. I want people to feel that the office is accessible and open to them, and that I can be a partner with the people in good ideas going forward.
Okay. So you've been a staunch advocate for transparency and accountability in city spending. With so much public distrust in government institutions, what would you say to voters who are skeptical about whether another elected official can genuinely make a difference in their lives?
Sure, it's a great question. I think you're seeing
a lot of great questions. I'm getting an A today.
You're a pro, Pearl. Look, I think we're seeing the erosion of democracy before our eyes, where you have Donald Trump, who is making people question and doubt the very institutions that we all have come to trust and rely on. And it's affecting how we treat each other. It's affecting how we vote. It's affecting, what we think of our local politicians. I wrote some of the toughest legislation to root out corruption in government, where if you're a politician and you ran for office and you've been convicted of betraying the public trust, you should not have another opportunity to run for office. Everyone deserves a second chance in life, but they don't deserve a second chance to run for office. So if you get caught stealing money from the people, you got to go do something else. You cannot continue being a public servant, because public service is a public trust. And for me, being able right now as a local city councilman, being able to represent the neighborhoods where I grew up is truly the honor of a lifetime. And I want people to believe again. I want people to believe in the system. And part of that is by making sure that they see a return on their investment as taxpayers, right? It all comes down to how we spend the money, Pearl, right? If we're spending the money properly and people are seeing a return on that investment, we can make them believe in our democracy again.
And finally, sir, how can one support or learn more about your campaign?
Sure, you can check out my website, justinbrannan.com. My last name is Brannan, justinbrannan.com. There's like barely 20 days left before the election. Early voting starts June 14th. The election is on June 24th. Everyone's going to get out there and vote for mayor, but don't forget to vote for Justin Brannan for controller. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you so very much. We appreciate you coming in as well and sharing your thoughts with our audience. You've been listening to People, Power and Politics. Thank you to our guest, Justin Brannan, for sharing his insights and plans as he campaigns to be New York City Comptroller. For more information on his platform, visit justinbrannan.com. As always, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, real change starts with real conversations. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Pearl.
You're very welcome.
People, Power and Politics. Hard talk, riveting interviews, community updates, in-depth analysis. That's People, Power and Politics. We tell it to you as it is. No holds barred. You are the people, you have the power. We bring you the politics. To listen to our show, be a guest, or to advertise, visit www.pppradio.nyc. That's www.pppradio.nyc.